Yeah, hi folks. Now, as most of you probably know, I got a hernia in January. And finally, 3 months later, I got to meet my surgeon. And now I've been told I must wait another 4 months to get my operation. So that's about a 4-month wait time to get a basic operation in a New Zealand public hospital. And thousands of people are in the same boat as me. But in that budget, DHB's only got $2.7 billion over 4 years, while that non-existent climate change BS got $2.3 billion. That's completely insane waste. Anyway, I'll start this off with a few key points.
Kia ora, good evening from Parliament, and tonight, the recovery budget. After a year of COVID economic upheaval, the government has laid out a roadmap for the country to move on. Here are some of the key points. A massive spend on benefits, $3.3 billion over the next 4 years, boosting benefits by between $32 and $55 a week.
Wow, $3.3 billion. So once again, our socialist government competes with their own minimum wage. Sole parents make more money to stay at home than go to work. But hey, look on the bright side, folks. That means they can spend more money on drugs, booze and cigarettes and KFC, etc.
$4.6 billion on health, including an extra $200 million for Pharmac to buy new medicines and equipment.
Yeah, but of that $4.6 billion, as I said before, the DHBs only get $2.7 billion. While the rest gets wasted on creating the new health system and the new Maori Health Authority. And this is what they're not telling you.
I can't talk about the budget.
One News has obtained a draft letter sent by the Health Minister to the Finance Minister outlining what's on the table ahead of the budget. It includes the option of reducing specialist services in the regions and the possibility of changing eligibility threshold for aged care and disability services. National got the letter by mistake as
Leaked, you mean?
part of a release of official documents. It's clear that it was a mistake because the cover letter stated it wouldn't be released, and it also included Dr. Ashley Bloomfield's private cell phone number that would usually be blacked out for privacy reasons.
This is very worrying for Andrew Little to be saying this is how he'd cut services to meet budget on Thursday.
You don't say.
A $1 billion injection for rail as part of a wider infrastructure package, and Māori are big winners in today's budget, roughly $1 billion in spending across health, education, housing and broadcasting.
More separatist stuff again. So I assume in the next budget, all non-Maori will get the same separatist privileges. And here's some more stupidity.
Kia ora anō. A major redevelopment is on the way for our home in Antarctica. The government is giving $344 million to replace outdated buildings and facilities at Scott Base. As Ryan Boswell reports, the funding has been warmly welcomed by those on the coldest continent.
Plans for our futuristic home in Antarctica are no longer on ice. This is the concept for the new and improved Scott Base.
It's really exciting to know the base is going to be built so it can help us support important scientific research for decades to come.
Ah, dear, more climate change, bogus climate change research, you mean?
Signed off for hundreds of millions in funding today. Planning for these 3 interconnecting buildings started 7 years ago and will take another 10 to complete.
We're planning to build the building in New Zealand and then break it down into large modules, put it on a ship, take it down to Antarctica and roll it off.
It's a far cry from the old base built in the 80s, for decades battered by snow and strong winds.
You do get to the stage where every dollar that you invest in the old base means that you're investing in a set of infrastructure that is towards the end of its life.
Up to 100 people will be able to stay in the new base, which includes a science and management building as well as an engineering facility.
The base will be set up for the next 50 years, and I don't think any of us can really predict what science needs will be 50 years out. So we're building the base in a way that has great levels of flexibility so that when science needs change, we can adapt the building to meet those science needs.
Construction creating more than 700 jobs.
So where are you going to get 700 builders from when they're needed in the housing market?
Those on the ice keen to get started.
There's a real culture here of making the place better for the people who come after us. So it's really good to know that there's going to be a base built that's going to help support science into the future for a long time to come.
Ensuring a warm welcome for our whānau, even in the coldest of climates.
Yeah, but I thought it was melting down there.
Now we learn that climate change is spinning the Earth off its axis. Of course it is, lovies. And presumably part of the cause of that spinning off its axis are all those rising sea levels sloshing around. Oh, hang on. As climate skeptic Patrick Moore points out, take a look at this photo of a calm lagoon in the tropics of Indonesia. Notice the sea level is well below the level of erosion on these limestone islets. As Patrick says, how can this be happening if the sea is steadily rising? Limestone does not corrode or erode this quickly in even a few hundred years. If anything, Patrick concludes, the height of erosion indicates a lower sea level now than thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and the same applies to the so-called sinking islands in the Pacific.
Indeed, our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, merely has to walk to the bottom of his Kirribilli garden and look across at Fort Denison, where he can clearly see the high tide mark is identical to what it was recorded back in the late 1800s.
Ryan Boswell, One News.
Tackling climate change is also a key focus of this budget, with $2.3 billion set aside. But the spend up, including a $1.3 billion investment in rail, has disappointed some. Kushla Norman with this.
Not long ago, this Dunedin Rail Workshop's future was looking bleak. Now Hillside is firmly part of the government's plan to invest $1.3 billion in rail, making 1,500 more wagons, taking freight off the roads, reducing emissions.
Now, the vast majority of our rail network is also electric rather than diesel, and so it is a fantastic alternative to the kind of heavy diesel trucks that are on the roads.
Yeah, but they're also 10 times more inconvenient.
The package includes funding for 60 new trains, a third main line in Auckland, and reopening the Wairoa to Napier line.
It's pretty much only enough to keep up with maintenance costs. It's not really transformational, and I guess that sums up this budget in a nutshell.
The agriculture sector, New Zealand's biggest greenhouse gas emitter, gets $61 million to help it reduce emissions. It's been welcomed by federated farmers, but is disappointing for others.
We had really hoped to see a $1 billion investment in helping farmers to switch to regenerative farming, but it's not in there.
The budget includes a $120 million fund to make 48,000 homes warmer and more energy efficient.
But really, it's just a drop in the bucket of what's needed. There are over 400,000 households who need this type of improvement, so we need to go far, far further.
A scheme to encourage people to buy more fuel-efficient cars gets resurrected in this budget.
Yeah, at a cost of $302 million, and it will look like this.
400 new electric vehicles are on the way for the government fleet, but even the minister in charge admits he'll struggle to meet the promise of a zero-emission fleet in the next 4 years. He spoke to political editor Jessica Much-Mackay.
The Climate Change Minister proudly showing off one of the new fully electric DOC cars. It has a range of 400 kilometres and a price tag of $63,000.
Yeah, so we have a Hyundai Kona, made in Korea using fossil fuels.
With a bulk discount.
Want to go look at a rose garden?
Yeah, let's go. $13.1 million will buy 422 new electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure. The minister says that'll save 11,600 tonnes of greenhouse gas over the next 10 years. At the moment, only 1% of the government fleet is electric. The announcement takes it to 4%. It is still snail's pace, though, isn't it?
Yeah, look, we've got about 16,000 cars in the total government fleet. There's only about 150 EVs at the moment. This announcement today quintuples that to 500, so that's, great progress, but obviously there's a lot more to go.
He says they'll be sold within 5 years.
Well, part of what we're doing is we're trying to stimulate the second-hand market.
But several people have told One News it doesn't go far enough.
In the context of the climate crisis, this is a tiny baby step when the government has both a mandate and the means to be making big leaps and bounds to clean up transport.
We would like to see some more electric cars, but the delivery on this is appalling.
Remember, the government was promising to have all 16,000 of its vehicles emissions-free within 5 years. That's now off the table, isn't it?
I'm reluctant to say that it's off the table. It is going to be very challenging.
The Conservation Department's getting a quarter of the new cars. It already has one on Stewart Island, but with no charging station.
No charging station. And that is going to be the problem right across New Zealand. Yeah, now folks, there are a couple of other points that about EVs they don't like to tell you. One, the manufacturer of EVs produce more than double the amount of greenhouse gases than conventional cars do, because lithium batteries require huge mining operations and transportation, etc. And two, what happens to the expired lithium batteries?